Hello, guys. My name is Ronnie Cox, and I want to welcome you to the TLGS 2024 conference. I'm from the University of Tennessee, and I'll be moderating your this presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I will get them to our presenter. And now I would like to turn it over to our presenter, who's going to discuss teaching students to read regression results, a statistical literacy lesson planned for librarians. Giovanna? Would you like to take it over?
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Um, as was mentioned, my name is Giovanna, and I'm the Assessment and Data Librarian here at McGill Library. I tell students that with my assessment hat, I work mostly behind the scenes, collecting and analyzing library usage data to help my colleagues make decisions about our services, our facilities, and our collections. With my data hat, I tell students that I'm public facing, so helping McGill students, faculty, and staff to find and work with data sets. And I do this through answering their questions and teaching. I find that my two roles complement each other really well and never leave me with a dull moment. So in this presentation, I wanted to provide a practical example of how librarians can teach others how to read descriptive statistics and regression results using a research question and also their own experiences working with data to guide them. So I'm going to be explaining the process and the resources used to create my statistical literacy workshops. I will also touch upon an effective strategy for promoting these sessions. So I want to touch upon first what the inspiration was for creating these workshops. I had two sources of inspiration. One was my own experience as a student. So I'm a full-time librarian here at McGill, and we are encouraged to take advantage of professional development opportunities to continue our learning, to improve our work. So I was auditing statistics courses here at McGill before the pandemic and have been taking online statistics workshops during the summer at the University of Michigan over the past few years. So the University of Michigan hosts the ICPSR summer program. ICPSR stands for the Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. The ICPSR summer program provides graduate level courses on different statistical analysis methods, which are attended by graduate students and junior faculty members from different countries. I have learned a lot from taking these courses over the years, and in most cases, I found that more classroom time is often spent on the theory behind different statistical methods rather than how to interpret the results obtained. How do you interpret the results that are displayed or shown to answer the research question that started the process, or the assessment question that started the process? When applying the statistical analysis methods I learned to the data that I needed to analyze as the assessment librarian, I found it challenging to understand the results and explain it to my colleagues. I heard similar comments from other classmates. So one of the sources of inspiration for these reading regression results workshops was from my own experience as a student with the questions that I had when I was trying to analyze my results. The other source of inspiration was from students themselves. Who asked me questions as the data librarian. They asked for advice on how to start analyzing data sets after they have obtained them. So the slide above shows an example of a request. The student emailed, I have data from a survey that is part of a research initiative on climate change and flooding. I'm still waiting to get access to the data page, but it would be great to set up a meeting to discuss the best ways to manage this data. My last experience with data analysis was a couple of years ago, so I would definitely appreciate your help and knowledge, especially in terms of the best software and methods to use. I met with the student and we talked about the initial steps the students needed to take to start working with the data sets, as well as what would be involved later on. So my two sources of inspiration for these reading regression results workshops that I created was one, my experience as a student taking courses on data analysis, and my experience working with students who asked me questions about the process. Those were my two sources of inspiration. The first workshop that I created was in the fall of 2022. The workshop was entitled Reading Statistical Summary and Linear Regression Tables. Where I focus on explaining what's important in these tables based on the questions that need to be answered. The workshop has been attended predominantly by graduate students who are from different faculties. I have had graduate students from arts, education, medicine, dentistry, science, engineering, and agriculture and environmental sciences attend these workshops. While workshops on finding and cleaning up data sets are commonly offered by academic libraries, workshops on the later steps of the data journey, that is, on analyzing the data and communicating the findings, are not as common. Reading regression results is part of the data journey. It touches on the first two steps to provide the context for understanding the regression results and is directly tied to the analysis and modeling of the data. So just as librarians teach others to perform activities at the beginning of the data journey, I believe we can also have a teaching role in the analysis of the data and the dissemination of the findings. When creating the first reading regression results workshop, I thought about other workshops I created that involved teaching others how to better understand something, whether it be to better understand a tool or to better understand the information that they're working with. I taught others in these situations by explaining the elements involved or providing tips on how to read the information. In other words, I realized that I had taught students before how to read different types of information. Context was different, but the overall approach would be the same. For example, dissecting the elements of a regression output is a similar approach to explaining the fields in a database record when teaching students how to search a database. Explaining to students the value of producing summary statistics, such as the mean, the median, minimum and maximum values, to better understand their data sets is a similar approach to suggesting that students read the introduction section and consult the references cited for more information when they're struggling to understand concepts presented in a journal article. The first question I sought to answer when creating the workshop was, what do you need to understand for describing, explaining, and analyzing data? Before analyzing data, we need to know our research question, and we need to be able to describe what we have. In other words, we need to know the lay of the land. More specifically, we need to be able to describe the variables, the items in our data set, which involves producing descriptive statistics for each variable, such as the mean, the median, the standard deviation, the minimum and maximum values. An explanation of these terms in relation to how they can help us better understand the variables in our data set became the content for the first part of the workshop, setting up the stage for reading the linear regression results later on. The workshop begins with a presentation of the research question and the source of the data set. The next section deals with getting to know what we have in our data set. So discussing categorical and numeric variables, looking at the descriptive statistics for the variables, and identifying any outliers. One way I discuss correlation as one way that analysts select the variables of a statistical model. After discussing correlation, I asked the students to predict which variables they think will drive a change in the outcome the most based on the correlation coefficients. I talk about using descriptive statistics, correlation, and graphs to understand the different variables they're investigating so that they form an initial idea of what the possible relationships can be. I remind students that you need to observe variation in the data to obtain statistically significant results, to see effects between your different variables. This will help them. I tell them that using descriptive statistics, correlation, and graphs will help them to create their statistical models later on and prompt them to investigate further if the results of a model contradict what they expected based on their preliminary explorations of the data. I reiterate the research question. I write it out in layman's terms, but I also write out the same research question as a regression equation. So this helps us later on in interpreting the different components of the regression table of the output. And then I spend about 30 minutes dissecting the parts of the linear regression results, explaining what each of the components in the output table mean. And I show students how to interpret the results of statistically significant variables. This is the main focus of the workshop. I conclude by briefly discussing ways of comparing different statistical models to pick the best model to answer the research question. The outline of the workshop is the process I follow when analyzing a data set to answer a question. So it's not something that's foreign to me. It's what I'm teaching, what I do when analyzing the library's usage data as the assessment librarian. So many questions that come up are things that I've had experiences with many questions that come up address experiences that I have faced in working with the library's usage data so that I can speak to students' questions using my own experiences. Activities in the workshop consist of asking students open-ended questions, such as the ones that you see on the slide. Thus far, I've only taught the workshop online, so I will ask attendees to share the responses in the chat window or to raise their hand if they wish to share their answers verbally. When I first started teaching this workshop in the fall 2022 term, this is when my colleagues were first going from teaching all their workshops online because of the pandemic to starting to teach some workshops in person. The first workshop that I taught was online, and I received a lot of attendees from graduate students, both on and off campus. So I continued teaching the workshop online to reach as many graduate students as possible. So that was a little bit of a side note. The activities I wanted to mention that the activities that takes the students the most time to complete is the one where I ask them to interpret the coefficients of different variables that are statistically significant. I give them an example and ask them to do the same with different variables. Often I use the same slide to teach the content and for the activity. In the example workshop slide you see on the right-hand corner, I interpreted the meaning of the miles per hour over the speed limit variable for the students, and then asked them to interpret other significant variables, such as the female variable in this case. Most of the activities I do with the students do not require additional materials, since I'm just asking them questions about a specific element they are seeing that I've not already given them an answer for. And I mention here that I ask students to interpret statistically significant variables that I haven't done. But later on in the workshop, in another slide, where we're looking at other pieces of information in the linear regression output, I asked them to explain to me why a variable is not statistically significant, such as age in this example was not statistically significant. So I asked the students, explain to me why in practical terms, because I don't just want students to think of p-values for statistical significance. I want them to think about, okay, practically, what does this mean? How do you translate this into everyday language? The activities in this workshop consist of all critical thinking questions, so that this workshop is purposely given at a walking pace and is not a race to the finish line. Students respond to my questions and also ask their own questions throughout the session, as I stop frequently to give them an opportunity to do so. Doing the activities and answering students' questions throughout the workshop takes about 30 minutes of the 90-minute session. The breakdown is roughly 20 minutes for the activities and 10 minutes for answering students' clarifying questions throughout. I have used books, websites, YouTube videos, followed courses both in person and online to help me explain statistical concepts and regression results. I'm attracted to resources that provide user-friendly explanations, i.e. that explain statistical concepts and regression results in plain language rather than mathematical terms. I'm always looking for resources, either reading something, listening to someone, seeing a demonstration online. I find a lot of resources out there, just like a lot of classroom time is spent on theory behind these statistical methods. Not enough resources, I find, not enough resources are out there that explain interpretation, or that go into enough detail about the interpretation of results. And from my experience analyzing data, and I know the students who attend my workshops are faced with the same thing. If you cannot interpret the results for an audience. It stays with you. It doesn't go anywhere. The dissemination of the findings is very important. Real Stats by Bailey is one of my favorite textbooks, and my favorite website is that of UCLA Statistical Consulting Group, who does an excellent job of explaining how to interpret the results of different regression models. The feedback I received from students has been positive, with suggestions for additional workshops on reading the results of different statistical models, since some elements of how you read the results of a linear regression model, the coefficients of a linear regression model are interpreted and read differently than the coefficients that you get from a logistic or count regression model. So last term, I created and started teaching 2 additional reading regression results workshop, one on reading count regression results and another on reading logistic regression results. Like the reading linear regression results workshop, the focus of the count and the focus of the logistic regression workshop is dissecting the regression output and explaining how to interpret the results of different variables. As a follow-up to the Reading Statistical Summary and Linear Regression Tables workshop, I email attendees a list of resources where they can dig deeper into what was discussed during the workshop. When relevant, I also include comments on why I think a particular resource is useful, since I have used most of the resources on the list for my own work. The students have shown appreciation for this bibliography. Attendance at the Reading Linear Regression workshop sessions has varied over time. I can get less than 10 people attending a session, just like I could get over 40 people attending a session. The interest is there since registration numbers are usually healthy for promoting the workshop to graduate students at McGill. The most effective method is through an electronic graduate student newsletter. So before the end of each month, the library's communications officer compiles a newsletter of library workshops for the following month and emails it to her contact in the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, who then distributes the newsletter to the graduate student officer in each department. Each graduate student officer then emails all the graduate students in their department. This has proved to be successful, as you can see in the slide above, as the registration numbers for my workshops more than doubled after the newsletter was emailed. I did this comparison in late 2022, early 2023, to help show the impact of the newsletter, because my colleague in communications asked me. She got asked by her contact in the Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies office whether it was worth sending out this newsletter. What was the impact? And just from these workshops that I taught in this short period, we were able to show the impact very clearly, that it did make a difference. Here are the steps I follow. I followed to design the workshops on reading regression results. And these are steps that you can use to teach other statistical concepts. The first thing I would say is be a student first, okay? Try doing an analysis using the concepts you wish to teach. You can read textbooks, watch videos, etc. on the topic. Be sure to test yourself by doing the exercises presented in the instructional materials you are consulting. What material or step did you find challenging? Consider how you can make it less challenging for students. What would you have liked to see? Another thing to consider, pick a research question that will guide the workshop content. Remember, everything starts and ends with the question. Ensure you understand what you are looking at by taking apart the output. What does each element mean that is being presented, and what is its purpose? Consider how you will communicate the results to an audience, as this often points to the content that you need to include in your workshop. Actually write it out. Whatever statistical concept that you're teaching, actually write it out. How would you communicate it to an audience? Because in writing it out, you will be confronted with questions or issues that are challenging that you might want to discuss with students. Decide another step, last but not least, decide whether you will teach how to use software in your workshop session. I decided for my workshops on reading regression results that I would not teach how to use the software, so I could concentrate on interpretation. That was important to me from my experience as a student and from the questions that students asked me as a data librarian. There wasn't enough time spent on interpretation, and I wanted to give interpretation the time that it deserved. There are also different software packages that students use at McGill. You have students using R, SAS, SPSS, and Stata. So if I had decided to incorporate teaching how to do this in a software package, I would have focused on maybe one workshop, another workshop on another software package, and alienated other students. I tell students that the tables I show in the workshops have been produced with Stata. That's the software that I currently use. I'm currently spending a lot of my time using Stata for analysis. At another time, I used to spend a lot of time in R, and I say that the outputs will look identical or similar in different software packages. They do. I also mentioned UCLA's Statistical Consulting Group website, which provides how-to steps for generating descriptive statistics and running different regression results in R, SAS, SPSS, and Stata. I wanted a sense from you. What workshops do you teach beyond searching that are part of the data journey? Just as to give us maybe a few minutes to share what we're doing. And another question that I had is, what first step can you take to move towards teaching statistical literacy or move towards expanding what you teach in this area? So the first workshop I shared in this session, what I was doing for statistical literacy, the workshops that I'm giving on reading regression results. But I wanted a sense, I'm always looking for ideas of other workshops that I can provide to help graduate students work and analyze their data. So I wanted a sense from people in the audience about other workshops that you're teaching beyond searching for data. So if people can type their answers to one or to the first and second question, that would be really great. Like I'm here to share what I've done, but I would also like to learn from others what ideas they have. I know we looked at sessions earlier today, about talking about workshops on disseminating your research and on literature reviews, but are there any workshops that people are giving about working with data that aren't just searching for the data sets themselves? Or any ideas that you have? Okay, Sue is saying we have a colleague who focuses on geospatial data, provides several scaffolded workshops on use of QGIS, ESRI products. Okay. Any other questions or any other ideas for workshops? When you look at, like I mentioned, a lot of librarians focus on defining, finding, or I should say on the first step, to define, find, gather, especially on finding. And we have with research data management, looking into the explore, clean, and describe. I just wanted to pick your brains on ideas for analyze, model, or tell a story. Stephen is saying we have a data management drop-in every month, and when folks show up, they have questions on a wide array of data-related topics, not specifically management. My second question is, what first step can you take to move towards teaching statistical literacy or move towards expanding what you teach in this area if you're already doing some work in this area? Jay Marie, thank you, says, I love the method of being a student first and taking your own instructional tests and assignments. Odds ratios was something I used to struggle with. I've been thinking about it, a short instructional item focused just on that and its applicability. Thank you, Jay Marie. It would be lovely, Sue saying, it would be lovely to host a workshop on identifying a data repository for researchers. Okay. And what's a first step that you could take towards teaching statistical literacy or move towards expanding what you teach in this area? I had listed the steps that I took to prepare to teach my workshops on reading regression results. They could be used to teach other statistical literacy concepts. Do any of these inspire you or think, oh, I can take an action in this direction? I'm interested. I could move in this direction by doing X. And if so, what would be your X? What is one thing that you can do?
I'm just going to unmute for a second. Um, One of the things I do is I tell grad students, don't skip these. You know, when you read an article and you're tempted to skip over it and you really think that it's just a jumble of stuff, this jumble of stuff is not going to go away. So really, you are going to have to try to learn it. Um, but I don't have a better means of telling them how to learn it than to push them back to their committees.
Okay.
So if you had, for instance, a main resource where you said, wow, this is such a go-to primer that here's the first place I tell people, I would love to know your starting point. Maybe I could pass it on to my people too.
And you actually anticipated my next slides. These are some resources that I have used and I share with students. I already mentioned the website by UCLA Statistical Consulting Group. If I could, I would kiss the creators. I would kiss all of them. This is beautiful because not only does it take apart regression results, explain what each element means, but they also have web pages on how to run regression analysis, different regression methods in different statistical software packages. That's why I don't teach. That's one of the reasons why I don't teach students how to do this in a statistical software package, because I could point to this page. You're an R user, you're a SAS user, you're an SPSS user, you're a Stata user. You can go to their website and it tells you step by step how to do it. I've used these pages myself to do my work. I also share with them textbooks that I really like. The resources that I share, most of them I have used in my own work to analyze the library's data. So I also when I share resources, I also tell students why I really like them, how I found them really useful, and this resonates with the students because these are not just sources I picked out of a hat or I just searched the catalog on for these sources. These are sources that I actually use for my work, and this message is attractive to the students. So thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. My email is on the slide.